Hello, welcome back to app development. All right, so what we're going to look at today is sort of the last mobile game that we're going to focus on in this class. So after this, we're actually going to move on to sort of other topics. So this is a pirate ship game. So you're going to be navigating the pirate ship around the ocean. There's going to be a timer that sort of runs down as the game is going on. If you hit a barrel, you get extra time. If you hit a coin, you get a point. And if you hit the monster, it takes time away. All right. Now, normally this game works by using the orientation sensor in your phone. So what that means is as you tilt your phone, that's actually how you make the ship move. So if you tilt your phone to the left, the ship moves left. Ship moves left. If you tip it to the right, it moves right. And how much you tip it is going to affect how slow and fast it moves. Now, obviously, that's not going to work on an emulator. We can't just pick up our entire screen and tilt it. And even if we did, it wouldn't do anything because there's no orientation sensor inside of our monitor. So we're going to kind of show you, I'm going to show you how to set it up with the orientation sensor. And then we're going to kind of show you, I'm going to show you a workaround so that we can still use it on our emulator. All right, so let me bring it up here on the emulator. So this is the screen right now, and you'll see that I have it paused. All right, so the game is paused right now. And if I unpause, you'll notice that this bar is going down and sort of changing colors. So this is my timer. And as it gets lower and lower, it goes from green to yellow, and eventually it's going to flip over to red. And that's kind of keeping track of my time. And then if I hit reset here, it'll go back up to the full. So because we can't actually tilt the phone, instead, we're going to have it work on sort of a fling where I can fling it around. And again, if I hit a barrel, that gives me extra time. If I hit the monster, I lose time. But here, let me show you if I hit a barrel now, my time should go back up. And then the coins are how I actually get points. So it's kind of moving around the screen, trying to collect different items. And then based on the items that I collect, different things are going to happen over and over again. So when your time gets low, you need to focus on the barrels. And when you've got more time, you can focus on the coins. So, all right, this is the general idea of how the game is going to work. All right, so let me just let the timer run down here now. All right, so eventually the timer is going to run down. And when that happens, all right, this is also going to be our first app that takes advantage of multiple screens. Now, it takes a second for the screen to load up on the emulator, but when the game ends, instead of just staying on that screen like we did for all our other games, we're actually opening up a new screen to the app. And then it gives me my final score, gives me a message, and then if I hit play again, all right, again, it'll take a second on the emulator. If this was actually an app that you installed on your phone, it would be instantaneous almost, but on the emulator, it does take a little bit to load up. So it will get there. You just have to be patient. Either that or the emulator is going to crash. Nope, there we go. So again, everything has to reload. But once everything reloads, the screen's going to come back up. The ocean will be there. The monster will be there. The coin will be there. The barrel will be there. Everything will be there. And then I can play another round of my game. My score is back to 0, and everything else is sort of back to the way it was. Okay? The reset button just restarts everything. The pause button just pauses things so that the timer and the monster stop moving. Okay, so this is what you're going to be building. I'm going to walk you through some of the initial setup in this video. And then, as usual, the lab document will walk you through the rest that you have to do and everything else that needs to happen. All right, so let me start by making a new project. So start new project. I'll call this pirate game. And as usual, it's going to bring up sort of your blank App Inventor screen. Now, there are 5 different pictures that you're going to need for this app. You need the water background, and then you need the ship, the barrel, the coin, and the monster. So I'm going to go to the upload file here, and I'm just going to upload all of these files. So I have them downloaded right here for you. You just have to get them off Google Classroom, and then you'll be able to get them. So let me open them. So there's the water one, and I'm just going to upload them all right now. There's the ship. There's the monster. There's the gold. And then there's the barrel. Okay. All right. So now that those are all done, I can start actually building the app. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag in a canvas, which is in drawing and animation. So there's my canvas. I'm going to set the width to fill parent. I'm going to set the height to 75%, because I do have stuff that needs to go underneath it. And then the only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name of the canvas, because we are going to have multiple canvases. So I'm going to call this one the ocean canvas. All right, so there's the ocean canvas. And then if I go to background image up here, I can now pick water.jpg, and there's my ocean. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is drag in 4 sprites. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's stuff that I'm going to do for each and every one of these. I'm going to change all their intervals to 10. And I'm going to change all their heights and widths to 50 pixels. So I'm going to do that for each and every one of these image sprites. So 10, height 50, width 50. And you need to do this because the pictures that you're uploading have a bunch of different sizes. So some of them are going to end up, if you don't change the height and width, some are going to be enormous and then some are going to be tiny. So we're just making them all the same size so that it's consistent across the game. Okay. So we've got that set. We've got, interval 10. All right. Then we can go in and put in the actual pictures. All right, so one of them is going to be your ship. One of them is going to be your barrel. One of them is going to be the gold coin. And then one of them is going to be the monster. All right. Now, again, we're going to be writing code that deals with all of these. So I would recommend changing the names of each of them. So I'm going to call this the ship. I'm going to call this one the barrel. So really creative names here. I'm going to call this one the gold. And I'm going to call this one the monster. So that way I've got all of that information right there. Right? So I've got my 4 sprites, I've got my canvas, I've got my water. Now, what I'm going to put underneath that is actually a second canvas. All right, so I'm going to draw a second canvas and drop it in underneath my ocean. Now for this canvas, I'm going to make the width fill parent again, just like we usually do. I'm going to make the height just 15 pixels tall. All right, so I'm making it 15 pixels tall. And then I'm going to set the line width to 5.0. All right, this canvas is what we're actually using as our health meter. All right, we're going to be drawing lines on this canvas to represent our health. So we want the line to be thick enough so that we can see it. So this is changing it to 5.0. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this canvas to be the health canvas. All right, just to keep them straight, because we are going to be writing code that involves both of these. So it's good to have a name that sort of relates to that. All right. And then the only other thing we need on kind of the design side is a horizontal arrangement. All right. We can set the width to fill parent. I'm also going to set align horizontal to center, all right, so that things are centered in there. And then we're going to put two buttons inside of it. All right, one is our pause button. So I'm going to set its text to pause, and then I'm going to rename it so that it's called the pause button. We're going to need a reset button. So again, I'm going to drag that in there. I'm going to rename it to reset, and then I'm going to change the text of it to reset. And then I'm going to do a final label here. All right. And this is going to be where I put the score. So I'm going to say score : 0. If you want it kind of centered on there, what we can do is in the horizontal arrangement, we can align centered, and then it won't like be up at the top or the bottom or the buttons. So like that'll make it kind of line up better with the buttons. If you want to make it the font size a little bigger, that's up to you. You can experiment with that until you find something you like. But that's basically what we're doing on sort of the visual side. Now, we are also going to need a clock. So in the sensors, we're going to want to go and drag in a clock. And we're going to set that timer interval to 10. And then we are also going to drag in an orientation sensor. Now, again, the orientation sensor is not going to do anything with the emulator. But if you're able to test this on a phone, then you will be able to see kind of what this does and how we can use it. So we're dragging in an orientation sensor, and it'll pop in down there. Right? So that's the layout for this screen. Now, this is our first app that's had multiple screens. So what you're going to do to add a second screen is we're going to go to this Add Screen button right here up at the top. It's right next to Screen 1. And then you have to pick a name for your second screen. We can just call it Screen 2. It's fine. So we can just hit OK. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring up a blank screen. And now this menu up here allows you to go back and forth between Screen 1 and Screen 2. All right, so it'll let you go through between the multiple screens of your app. Now, on this app, what I'm going to do is for the screen, I'm going to both align things horizontally centered and vertically centered. So I'm going to change both of those to centered. And I'm going to give it a background color just so that it's not sort of a boring white. As far as what color it is, that's up to you. You've just got to pick a color. There's my color. Now, in terms of what's on this, it's not much. It's 3 text labels. So let me bring those in. 1, 2, 3. And then it's a button. All right. The first text label is just going to say like game over. So I'm going to make the font a little bigger. And I'm just going to say game over. Okay. Maybe make the font even bigger still. That doesn't look big enough. How big do we want to go? All right, that's better. All right. Text label 2 is going to be where we report the score. So right now, that can just say score : 0. Eventually, we'll replace the 0 with whatever their actual score was. But right now, we can just type in score : 0. Text label 3 is where you're going to give a message. Now, right now, we can just put in any sort of message. But eventually, you're going to customize the message based on their score. Now, if you want to basically hit the enter key when you're typing your message so that it spaces it out, you have to click HTML format. So if you check this box, then when you're typing the message, so let's say I type, you call yourself, and then if I wanted to go down to a new line, I do a less than sign, I do a BR, and then I do a greater than sign, which is HTML for a new line. And then I can type my new line. So I can say, you call yourself a pirate with a question mark. And you'll see that because I put that BR in there, it's going to make it enter where I told it to. So instead of it putting the word A up on this line, it dropped it down to that line because that's what I requested. And then because I have multiple lines here, I'm probably also going to want to have it aligned to center so that it looks like this. All right, so again, what your say aren't that important. Like if you don't want to hit enter, you don't have to worry about this HTML format and the little BR thing that I was talking about. But if you want to do that, that's how you can do it. Again, it's a less than sign, the letters B and R, and then a greater than sign. But you have to have the HTML format checkbox, otherwise it won't work. All right, and then last but not least, on the button, I'm just going to put the text play again. All right, so this is going to be our play again button. All right, so now we have both of our screens set up. We have screen 2, which is just kind of the ending screen where they've lost, and we tell them their score. And then we have screen 1, which is where the game actually takes place and all the action is going to happen. All right, so let's go into the coding window. All right, so first thing we're going to do is just talk about how to get the ship to move using sort of the orientation sensor. Now, the orientation sensor is going to be able to detect, how much you're tilting your phone and the direction that you're tilting your phone. So if we go down here to orientation sensor, you're going to see that it has all of these different properties, like the angle, the azimuth, the magnitude, the pitch, the roll. So these are what we're going to be able to use to sort of detect which way the phone is being tilted and basically how much it's being tilted. So for us, the angle is going to let us know which way it's being tilted. The magnitude is going to be able to tell us how much it's being tilted. So these are the two that we're primarily going to use. But in the lab document, it does explain all of these different ones if you're curious about what they do. So let's go to procedures, and we're going to make ourselves a procedure. All right, because again, anytime we have to do something over and over again, it's a good idea to put it in a procedure. So in this procedure, we're going to handle the actual movement. So we're just going to do set the ship, and we're going to set its heading, because remember, heading is the direction that something's moving in. All right, we use this in the golf game and the bouncy ball game. And we're going to get set ship speed. All right, so this again is how quickly it's going to move. And as I said before, speed is kind of like distance. It's telling you how many pixels it's going to move in whatever you've set the interval at. Okay. Now, as far as what's getting plugged into here, again, this is where we're going to this orientation sensor. The angle is going to let us know the heading. So the angle in which we tilt the phone will give us the direction that the ship is going to move. And then the speed is going to be the magnitude. All right. Now, magnitude is measured on a scale of 0 to 1. So if we set the speed to 0 to 1, it's not going to be very big. So we're going to do the same sort of thing that we did with our flick, where we're going to give it a little boost. So it's going to be the magnitude at which it's being tilted, but then we're going to multiply that by 100. Because again, the scale on magnitude is 0 to 1, so it's basically just decimal values. So by multiplying that by 100, we'll actually be able to get the ship to move decently quick. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this procedure to be called move ship, because we are going to have a few different procedures. Now, all I'm going to do with this procedure is I'm going to put it inside of our timer. All right, so I have this clock 1 here, which has the event when clock 1 timer. So this is when the timer expires on clock 1. All right, all I'm going to do is call move ship. So basically, every 10 milliseconds, I'm going to be updating the angle and the magnitude that I'm reading from the orientation sensor. And then I'm going to feed those into our image sprite so that it can move and accelerate and decelerate based on how the phone is being tilted. Now, again, there's no way to demo this on the emulator, but if you have a phone, you should be able to hook it up right now, tilt the phone, and see that the ship moves in the direction that you're tilting it, and it picks up speed the more you tilt it, and it slows down the less you tilt it. So that's kind of the big thing that we're using in this lab. All right. Now, as I said, this isn't actually going to work. So what we're going to do so that we can still move our ship around and test things is we're actually going to disable this code, because if we leave it active, it'll kind of prevent things from working. So it's here, it's there. If you've got a phone, you can leave it. But for everybody else, we're going to right click on these dark green blocks and choose disable. All right, we're going to right click on these dark green blocks and choose disable. And this makes the code inactive. All right, it doesn't delete it, so it's right there if we want to bring it back, but it makes it inactive so it won't actually run. And then what we're going to do instead is we're going to go to our ship. We're going to get the when ship flung event, which we've used before. So you should be pretty familiar with this. And we're going to use this to set the heading and the speed of the ship. All right, so this is going to allow us to fling the ship around the screen, since we can't use really the orientation sensor on the emulator. So I'm going to set the speed. I'm going to set the heading. The heading is going to be whatever heading the person flicks their finger. And then the speed, again, we've kind of talked about this. It's hard to get a good flick on the emulator. So I'm going to give it a little boost here and say that it's speed times 2.5 so that it gets that little boost. All right. So this is what we're kind of just using as a proxy so that we can actually fling the ship around and have it move. All right. So if I bring up the emulator here, you're going to see that I can fling my ship around the screen. All right. Nothing else is moving or happening because I haven't actually written the code for that yet, but I can at least move my ship around the screen. And again, if we had the orientation sensor, I wouldn't even need this fling code. I could just tilt my phone and have it move that way. All right, but this at least gives us something so that we can still test and check out the rest of the program from our computers and from the emulator. All right. So next, let's talk about this health bar that we're going to use. All right, so the health bar is basically going to be this canvas down here. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep drawing the line on the canvas, but we're going to draw it a little shorter every time so that it looks like the bar is going down. All right, and to the human eye, it's going to be happening so quick that it looks like one solid bar just going down, 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 down. But what the computer is really doing is it's drawing a line, it's erasing the line, and then it's drawing a new line that's a little bit shorter. And then it's erasing that line and drawing a new line that's a little bit shorter and erasing that line and drawing a new line that's a little bit shorter over and over and over again. And it's going to happen so quickly that our eye isn't going to be able to detect that it's being erased and redrawn. It's just going to see one bar kind of slowly and steadily decreasing. All right. Now, to do this, we're going to have to keep track of our health or our time. So to keep track of things, we need a variable. So I'm going to initialize a global variable called health. I'm going to set that variable to 500 at the start. All right, so let me get a math and set it to 500. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 1 from this every time clock 1 expires, every time the timer goes off. So since this is already has the move ship procedure in it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to move ship and I'm going to add this block that subtracts 1 from the health. So I'm going to do set global health. I'm going to get a subtraction block. I'm going to subtract the value 1, and I'm going to be subtracting it from the original value of health. So every 10 milliseconds, health is going to go down by 1. All right, every 10 milliseconds, health is going to go down by 1 until eventually it hits 0, and that's when the game is going to end. Now, as far as drawing the lines, all right, we're going to make a procedure for that. All right, so I'm going to grab this procedure, and I'm going to call this the draw line procedure. Now, it turns out that I'm going to need to be able to draw all sorts of different lines. So when you want your procedure to be more flexible, all right, what we can do is we can add what are called inputs. So if I click on this gear, you're going to see that I can add inputs. All right. And this is information that I can send to the procedure so that it does something slightly different each time. So I'm going to actually plug in two inputs. All right. So I'm dragging those both in there. They pop up as X and X2, but I'm going to change their name. I'm going to call one of them, I'm going to call one of them current health, and I'm going to call the other one color. Now, current health is basically going to be what I use to pick the length of the line. So as your health goes down, the line's going to get shorter. And then the color is going to be telling it what color I want it to be. So whenever I use this procedure, whenever I use this function, I'm going to have to tell it what color I want and how long I want the line to be. All right. So from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to my health canvas, and I'm going to say set paint color to this variable up here. And remember, this variable is going to have whatever information we send it. All right, we're going to be sending it information, and then we're basically taking that information and passing it in down here. And then we're also going to draw a line. So I'm going back to the health canvas. I'm going to get the purple draw line. And the X1 and the Y1 is just going to be 0, 0. So we're going to start in the top left corner of the canvas. And then the length of the line, which is the X, because we're going to draw the line horizontally, is whatever the current health is. So again, I hover over that procedure. I get this current health block, and I plug it in there. And then the Y is going to stay 0 because we're just drawing a horizontal line. All right, so this is going to let us alter the color of the line, and this is going to let us alter the length of the line. All right, so now that we have this draw line, we're going to make a third procedure. All right, this is the procedure lab called display energy. All right, you could also call it display health. I'm just going to call it display energy because I think that's what shows up in the lab document. And what this is going to do is it's going to call this draw line procedure. So I'm going to say call draw line, and you'll see that when I call it, it now needs these two pieces of information. It wants to know the color, and it wants to know the current health or the length. So I'm actually going to get two of these. Now, the first one is going to erase the line. So I'm going to erase the line by basically drawing a white line on top of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, draw a white line that has the width of the canvas. So I'm going to my health canvas, and I'm getting its width. So this white line is going to be the width of the canvas, and I'm going to make the color white, is effectively going to erase it, because this is going to draw a white line on top of whatever's there that's the full length of the canvas. Once I've erased it, then I'm going to draw my second line, all right, which is my health variable. So I have this global health variable. I'm going to say, all right, send this information to the draw line function so that it knows how long to draw it, and then make this line show up in the color red. So if I go to my colors menu, red. So what's happening here is when I call display energy, it's going to draw two lines. One is going to be a white line that's the width of the canvas, and then it's going to draw a red line that's the length of my health variable. So at the very start, it'll be 500, and then it'll get shorter and shorter and shorter as my health gets subtracted. All right? So what I'm going to do is right after I subtract 1, I'm then going to display my health. So I'm going to call display energy. Right? Now, my emulator's been running, so right now it looks like the line isn't there. But if I reset my health back up to 500, you're going to see there's my red line. At first, it doesn't look like it's going down because 500 is way off the screen. But as we sit here, if we wait long enough, right, you're going to eventually see that this bar starts going down because the line keeps getting shorter. We're erasing the old line, and then drawing a new line that's just a little bit shorter, and it looks like the bar is just shrinking, but really what's happening is we're drawing a white line and then a little shorter red line, drawing a white line and a little shorter red line, a white line and a little shorter red line, and it gives us the look as if everything is just going down again and again and again and again. All right. So let me just kind of review what's happening here because there was a lot we just did. All right. So we have this health variable that starts at 500. We subtract 1 from it, and then we call display energy. All right. Display energy brings us over here, and this is calling to draw lines. All right. And remember, draw line is something we created. All right. The first one is the length of the canvas with the color white. And then the second one is the length is whatever our health is, and that's the color red. So that gets sent up here. These inputs retrieve that information. So current health retrieves the length of the line. Color retrieves the color of the line. And then we use those to draw our lines. So we have one function that can draw both the white line and the red line because we set up these input values. All right. And that's kind of what makes these procedures even more useful is that by adding inputs, we can reuse them for all sorts of different things, all right? And we don't have to rewrite code. We just use these to be much more flexible with our programming. All right, so now we have to talk about actually switching screens and sort of having the when you run out of energy, when you run out of health, or what that looks like. All right, so what we're going to start with is we're going to need an if statement because this is going to allow us to detect when our energy hits 0. So we're going to say if, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say if and get a less than or equal to. All right, and it's important that we use less than or equal to here because eventually in the game, the monster is going to be able to hit you and take away your life. And it's possible that your life would go negative and skip right over 0. So we don't want to just say if global health equals 0, because if you were hit by the monster, you might go below 0, and then this if statement would never trigger. So we're going to say if global health is less than or equal to 0. Now, first thing you're going to want to know is that when you switch screens, what actually happens is a new screen gets opened on top of the existing screen that you have. So there's kind of like this layering of you open the app and you've got screen 1, you open another screen, and screen 2 goes on top of screen 1. So with that, both screens are actually still sort of active. So generally what we want to do is when that happens, we want to shut off any clocks or timers that are on the lower screen. So on screen 1, we've got the clock 1 going. We're going to want to turn that off before we switch to the other screen. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to say set timer enabled, and I'm going to put it over to false. All right, so this is going to set the clock and turn it off. All right. And then once the clock is off, then we can switch screens. So to switch screens, we go to the control menu. And inside of here, there is a block that says open another screen, screen name, and then open another screen with start value. Both of these will bring you to the other screen. We're going to use the second one because we're going to want to send that screen some information. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug this in here. All right, the screen name is just going to be whatever you chose as the screen name. So I didn't change mine, so it's just going to be screen 2. And the start value is going to be the player's score. All right, we're going to send the score to that other screen. So to do that, I am going to need to make a score variable because I haven't done that yet. So here's my score variable. All right, I'm going to call it score. I'm going to set it to 0. And obviously throughout the game, this will be changing. But right now, I'm just going to plug it into the start value here so that when I open the second screen, I'm sending it the player's score. All right. So let's watch what happens if I sort of restart everything here. So let me set my health back to 0. So I can do that by just right-clicking on this and saying do it, and that'll set it back to 500. And then I need to get my clock back on because this had already turned it off. So I'm going to just click do it right here to turn it back on. And then I'm going to switch it back to false because that's what I actually want to have happen. All right, so here I am. I've got my game. I can move my ship around. Again, my health is at 500, so it eventually will start going down. And then when it gets to 0, this is going to trigger. My if statement right here is going to trigger. The clock is going to get turned off, and then we're going to open up screen 2. All right, so you can see the big dramatic moment. We're going down here. And then once it gets to 0, that's going to trigger and bring us over to screen 2. All right, so here we are. Now, again, it takes a second for it to load up. And you'll notice when we go over, our code disappears. All right, the way it works in App Inventor is basically each screen is almost like its own program. So any of the code that you wrote in screen 1 doesn't exist over here in screen 2. So like screen 2 is sort of a blank slate, and you have to write all of your code from scratch. Now, what we can do in here is we can receive information from that other screen. All right, and that's what we're going to do here. So if we go to screen 2 on our left-hand side, there's a block that says when screen 2 initialize, which is another way of saying when the screen loads. So this is code that we want to write when the screen loads. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to set that second text label, right? Because currently it says score 0, but we want it to say whatever score the player actually achieved. So I'm saying set label 2.text2. And then we're going to do it the same way that we did it back in like the Groundhog Lab or the Golfing Lab. We're going to join together the word score with a colon. And then instead of actually typing in a number, we're going to let the program tell us this number. Now, the way we get that number is in this control menu. Right? Down at the bottom, there's a block that says get start value. And the start value is the information that was passed from the other screen. So when we opened up the screen, we said, hey, pass it the score. To retrieve that information, we use this get start value. And that will plug in the starting score or whatever score the player achieved and demonstrate it on our screen. Now, again, we didn't have anything to actually change our score, so right now it just says score 0. But eventually this will list your current score and update it that way. Now, last but not least is this play again button. So we're going to set that up quickly, and we're just going to say when clicked. Now, here's the part that was weird. All right, so what I said is when you open up the app, you've got screen 1. When you open screen 2 is on top of that. Screen 1 still exists underneath. So we don't reopen screen 1 because that would actually end up with 2 screen 1s. You'd have the one on the bottom, this one, and then a one on top of that. What we do is we close screen 2. And when we close screen 2, the app is going to go back to showing screen 1 because that was still there underneath the whole time. So again, when we click this play again button, we're not reopening screen 1, we're just closing the current screen, which then reveals screen 1 back to us. So in this control menu, there's a block that says close screen. So I can put that in there. Now, when I click on this button, again, it's not going to reopen screen 1. It's going to close this screen. And by closing this screen, I automatically go back to screen 1. All right. And again, it'll take a second, but it will load. Now, a couple of things that I want to just kind of, so it crashed. It does occasionally crash. You're going to find that when you have multiple screens, it is going to crash more often. There's just no way around that. One thing that I'm going to recommend is that when you're working on the app, so let me just shrink this out of the way. It can be annoying to have the screens constantly switching when you're trying to test things. So we have this code here. I would disable it so that you don't actually switch screens back and forth all the time. Because again, it can get really annoying having it continually go back and forth from screen 1 and screen 2. If you keep this code enabled. So eventually you want to enable it like when you're done with everything. But when you're testing things out, I would just get rid of this so that even if your health goes to 0, you stay on the first screen, because it can get really sort of annoying and frustrating to go back and forth. The other thing that you should be aware of is you can sort of break things when you're using the emulator. All right, and here's what I mean by that. When you're using the emulator, I can go up here and switch between screen 1 and screen 2. All right, I have the ability to just go and switch between screen 1 and screen 2. And when you do that, the emulator will update with whatever screen you're on. But this code right here won't necessarily work correctly. And here, let me demo it. I'm going to restart the emulator. So let me pause this so that you don't have to watch me restarting the emulator. All right, so here's the emulator. I launched the emulator from screen 2. All right, so I launched the emulator from screen 2. So if I hit the play again button, it's actually not going to work because screen 1 isn't open underneath it. Now, just realize that when you turn this into an actual app, that could never happen. All right, the user wouldn't just suddenly be able to jump to screen 2. They'd have to start with screen 1, and screen 2 would be open underneath. So just realize that sometimes it's going to look like it's not working because you manually switched back and forth between screen 1 and screen 2, whereas the user can never actually do that. So it will work if the user is using your app because they have to have screen 1 open, and they can only get to screen 2 from screen 1. You as the programmer can override that, and then it makes it look like things aren't working, but in fact, they are working. All right? It's just if you start manually switching back and forth between these two screens, it can cause you to think things are not working when in fact they are. You know, as long as you progress from screen 1 to screen 2 through the program, it'll work as intended. Okay, so this is everything you should need to get started. The lab document will take you the rest of the way through. So I hope this was helpful. And as always, make sure you reach out if you have any questions. All right. Bye.